Welcome to part 2 of our squat series, where in this video we're going to be talking about the stance, our toe angle, bracing, and unracking in the walkout. So for the first thing we're going to talk about, it's going to be our stance. So a general good rule of thumb for squatting, if you haven't done it in a long time or just ever, you can take a slightly wider than shoulder width stance. That's a good starting point for most people, and your toe angle when you're in that stance could be slightly turned out about 45 degrees or a little bit less, depends on what you're comfortable with. But one way you can get a little bit more specific with it is using this little self-assessment tool that I like to use. So to do that, if you lie on your back and you bring your knees up towards your chest, and then you let your legs kind of fall out to the side, if you were to take a picture of me from the side and then tilt it vertical, I'd pretty much be in a really deep squat position. So in this position, if I look down and I see my leg position and my foot position, how far apart they are, how far turned out my toes are, this isn't a bad starting place either, because you know that your hips can tolerate being in this position in a deep squat. So if I were to rotate a little bit and show you where my feet roughly end up, you can see it is slightly wider than shoulder width and a little bit turned out. Okay, so some other things that can influence your stance. It's not just that exercise that I just showed you being the be-all end-all for your stance width. Other things that can affect it are your genetics, so how you're literally built, limb length, probably your genetics, but all this stuff can influence how wide or how narrow your stance is, but also your goals. Why are you squatting in the first place? Do you want to develop a higher vertical jump, or do you want to build your quads, or do you want to just move as much weight as possible? All those things can play into your stance. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is bracing. So the whole purpose of bracing is to just create more rigidity through your trunk so that you can transfer force better from your feet into the barbell. There's a couple of different ways to do this, but generally a good rule of thumb is to take a deep breath in with your abdominals, and then flex your abs almost like you're trying to do a standing crunch. If you feel your abs kind of turn on or become more rigid, a good way to feel this is if you literally put your hands in your abdominals and then take a deep breath in, and then brace your abs by flexing your stomach. You should feel a lot of rigidity come through your core. So to do this with a barbell on your back, you also have to think about your breathing. You don't want to be breathing as you're going through a rep or coming up. You want to take most of your breathing when you're standing up at the top at the end of the repetition. This way, it still is consistent throughout the whole rep, and you still are able to keep a pretty rigid core without having to breathe through it. For the walkout, pretty simple. What you're going to do is take that bar position that we talked about in the first video. You're going to brace before you even unrack the bar. You're going to take a deep breath in, brace through your core, and then you're going to aim to walk out 3 to 4 steps maximum. You don't want to take too long getting your stance once you get your bar on your back and you're walking the weight out, because the heavier the weight gets and the more advanced you get in squatting, the more it's going to waste energy. You want to be able to conserve as much as possible and be as consistent as possible with each set. So to put it all together, I'm just going to walk through the entirety of the setup of the squat all the way up through the unrack. So to start, we're going to put the bar in that position that we found was most comfortable. For me, it's going to be low bar. So I'm going to squeeze my shoulder blades together. I'm going to slide the bar until it hits that shelf on my rear delts that we talked about in video 1. I'm going to take a deep breath before I even unrack the bar. I'm going to brace my abs, stand up, walk back 3 to 4 steps, 1, 2, 3. And when you're in this position here, you're ready to begin the squat.